Sega Genesis Buyer's Guide, or just Sega Buyer's Guide, really. This is just a normal issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly, so there's going to be a ton of other content in here that has nothing to do with the Super Nintendo, but because it's also sort of the CES, Summer CES 1991 issue, there are just a ton of like capsule previews. It's a hard word to say. Capsule previews of just games for every system. I mean, there might even be like 100 of them in here. So I can't spend time talking about each and every game, or this video would be like hours long. So if I gloss over a game that you think is worthy of discussion, you should absolutely bring it up down in the comment section and let us all know why you think so. So turning to the first page, which is really just the inside cover, there's sort of a double ad here for Bill Elliott's NASCAR Challenge for the NES and the Game Boy. And if I remember correctly, I think this was actually developed originally for the DOS PC, and then got ported to the NES and the Game Boy. And I guess what's sort of noteworthy about the game is sort of the level of control you have over the setup of your car. Like, it's really not an arcade style racing game at all. So on one hand, it's a technical achievement, especially having it on the NES, but that doesn't necessarily make it fun to play, especially today. Like, these days, if you're going to play a simulation style racing game, you're probably going to do it on modern hardware. But back in the day, this was modern hardware, right? Unless you had a home PC. So it's a cool game to check out, but that's about it, really. Like I said, there's far more fun driving games to play on the NES, I would say. Table of contents, nothing really that we need to talk about over there, but on this side is a full page ad for the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves NES game. And normally when I see movie licensed or TV licensed or whatever licensed video games, your eyes kind of roll a little bit, like, oh, this is going to be crappy. But this was a game that I was kind of pleasantly surprised by. And what I kind of wanted to say about it is, when I talk about a game being a weekend rental, and I've explained this before, I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. I just mean that, it's a game that you can get a few days of fun out of, and then you're just sort of done with it. And I think a game like this just exemplifies the idea of a weekend rental, in that, it's really fun, but it closely follows the plot of the movie, so you don't really need to play through it more than once, I don't think. But, I like this movie a lot. I understand, Kevin Costner's bad acting and any other problems someone might have with the movie, but I really enjoyed the movie when it came out. So being able to play this video game version of it was pretty cool. And one other thing I was going to say is that, I don't know if it was the August 1991 issue, but around the same time, there was an issue of Nintendo Power that had this game as the cover story. And, as is often the case with Nintendo Power cover story games, there was like a full walkthrough basically in the magazine. So if you had a subscription to Nintendo Power so that you had that issue, you could rent this game for the weekend and blow through it using the guide, and I think just have a ton of fun. But the only kind of funny thing, I don't know why this is the case or what happened, but I think the movie came out in like June of '91, and then this issue of this magazine was probably on the newsstands in July, and probably about the same thing for the Nintendo Power issue. But then for some reason this game got kind of delayed at the last minute and didn't come out until like November. So I guess not as cool as if you'd been able to play the game right away. And then here's a full 2-page ad for Stormlord. And I know that we've talked about Stormlord before on a magazine read-through, and I don't remember exactly what I said about it. I probably wasn't anything positive, but I had a chance to kind of play through the game a little bit more. It was made by this company called Houston Associates or something like that, and it basically came out for like every home computer in Great Britain, and then it just subsequently got ported to the Genesis. But I think think I always try to play it, approaching it as like an action platform game, and that's really just not what it is. It's really more of an action puzzle game. Through the levels there are these little fairies that seem like they're trapped in like crystal balls or something. I'm not really sure, but the point of the game really is you have to collect the fairies, but you have to figure out how to get to them. So like if there's like a swarm of bees blocking you from getting to the fairy, you can pick up like a pot of honey and go carry it over near the bees so that they move to go get the honey and stuff like that. But so my point is just that it's a far better game than I originally gave it credit for. Next is just a letter from Ed Semrad, and then on the other side here is an ad for WWF Superstars for the Game Boy. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before or not, but I don't know. I don't really get anything out of these wrestling games. I used to watch WWF wrestling, but it was like in the '80s, and so by this time, I wasn't really watching it anymore. But I could imagine where if like you were a big fan, maybe you would think a game like this is cool because you can play as like your favorite wrestler or whatever. But I feel like I'm not the best person to even really comment on it, if that makes sense. Letters to the editor. People were writing in asking for an update on the Sega CD, and then a bunch of people wrote in. Well, not a bunch, but like 3 people wrote in asking about Neo Geo price cuts, and they even mentioned here in the text that in Japan, as of July 1st, the system has been reduced from 425 to 360, and game prices have been slashed by more than 50%. Non-1975 is about $100, and the big memory games are about 155. So, still far more than any other home console. And then they mentioned here later, I think that oh yeah, here as to whether the U.S. will follow suit, SNK would not comment. So there you go. And then somebody's writing in asking about the Atari Panther, and the editor just writes back saying that the Panther got killed, but there's a new thing called the Jaguar coming out. And then here's an ad for Adventure Island 2 for the NES. And that's noteworthy because, as I've talked about before, the first Adventure Island was just sort of a retooling of the first Wonder Boy. So Adventure Island 2 is actually like the first, purpose-designed Adventure Island game. And I like all the Adventure Island games. So this is definitely worth playing for me. It shows a little screenshot here. It has like this world map, but it's really just kind of for show. But the cool thing about Adventure Island 2 is you get these Dino Buddies. I don't know if they're actually officially called Dino Buddies or if that's just what people call them. But you can of course ride skateboards in the Adventure Island series. Everybody knows that. But starting with the second one, you can get on the backs of these different dinosaurs. I think there's 4 different dinosaurs in the game, and they each have like their own abilities. And riding the dinosaur, much like riding a skateboard, also just gives you like 1 extra hit point. So that's kind of cool. But I just like the Adventure Island games as a whole, whether on the NES or there was New Adventure Island on the TurboGrafx, or there was a couple of them on the Super Nintendo. I just think they're all really good games. Somebody was writing in asking about what determines magazine size. Because he mentions about how around the holidays they get up to about 200 pages, and then they taper off in the summer and they're barely 100 pages. Obviously more games come out closer to Christmas, so there's the obvious answer, but I think sometimes they also pack the ads into the magazines around the holidays as well. And over here's an ad for Might and Magic, Gate to Another World. It's kind of weird. I've never really played any of the Might and Magic games, which is funny because in the early 90s I was really big into PC gaming, and I think it's 3 Might and Magic games came out like while I was an active PC gamer, but I guess I just didn't know anybody that had any of them, because we used to all just trade games at school. I'm trying to remember which Might and Magic game this is a port of. I want to say it was Might and Magic 3, but don't quote me on that. started sort of making side money, making basically multi-page ads for game companies, and so I guess the links ad that the EGM people made ended up in another magazine. But I thought the second thing was a lot funnier, just because I remember Corey mentioning how Fantasy Star 2 got kind of ruined for him because it came with a hint book, and as a kid who didn't really have any self-control, he just used the hint book to blow through the game. But this Eric guy, I guess, has a different opinion. He says, second, I hope you guys are happy. I called Sega, and the Phantasy Star 3 book is, as you stated, separate and not included with the game. I will now have to pay $70 for the game and then another $20 for the book. So I guess Eric was seeing it more as a value proposition, getting the book with the game. Anyway, over here is an ad for Frankenstein from Bandai. I mean, I don't know. Frankenstein, it's got obviously it's not really actually even based on the story. It's got Frankenstein's monster as the main bad guy, but it's not like it follows the plot of the book or anything. Only thing really good I can say about it is it's a pretty cool intro cinematic, but the gameplay itself sucks pretty bad. And then here's an ad for PGA Tour Golf. And one thing I thought of when I was looking at this is, I know sometimes I complain about game companies having ads and not showing screenshots, because to me it's like, well, why would you not show the game unless you're trying to hide that the game doesn't look very good? But I feel like EA managed to kind of get away with that just because the graphic design of their ads was so good. I mean, you really only have a handful of screenshots that take up hardly any of the real estate, but just the way the ad is put together, just just showing the scorecards and everything. I mean, something about it just makes it seem like, wow, there must be this game must have a lot of realism to it. And that's not limited to the PGA Tour golf ad. It's just how all of EA Sports ads were back then. Then we get started with reviews. Before we do that, I just wanted to quickly point out Kabuki Quantum Fighter. And just the reason for that is Kabuki Quantum Fighter is a side-scrolling action platformer that I would put sort of in the same category as the Power Blade games or maybe even Batman, even though that's a licensed game, obviously. Just sort of non-A-list titles that I think are still Shatterhand would be another one that are still just really solid games. And Kabuki Quantum Fighter it's a tough game. There's a lot of cheap deaths. I would say, borrows liberally from the Ninja Gaiden series, especially number 2. But that doesn't mean that it can't be a fun game. So it's worth checking out. And the other thing I would just say is that there really aren't too many games in the NES anymore that are good that you can still get relatively cheaply. But Kabuki Quantum Fighter you can get for about $20, which sad as it is, these days is pretty cheap for an NES game. So check it out, Kabuki Quantum Fighter. Oh, I was gonna say you whip people. You have long red hair, and you whip people with your hair. That's one of your weapons. I don't even know what that's all about, but it looks pretty cool. But anyway, getting over here to the review crew. So these are the very first Super Nintendo reviews to appear in EGM. So I think that's pretty cool. The first one naturally has to be Super Mario World, which up here they still have listed as Super Mario Brothers 4 because that's what it was called in Japan. It was Super Mario Brothers 4 Super Mario World. But then down here in the text they refer to it as Super Mario World. But anyway, you can see they give it straight 9s. I think sort of the main complaint that the review crew had, which is kind of one of the main complaints that you would see from gamers, if you went and checked out old Usenet posts, is that I think people were just sort of expecting more as far as I don't know, as far as what, I don't know. I mean, it's still a Super Mario Brothers game. It takes advantage of a lot of the hardware capabilities that the Super Nintendo has above and beyond the NES, as far as having awesome music, using sprite scaling and rotation and having some Mode 7 stuff. But so these people that complain and like, oh well, I thought it was going to be a bigger step forward. I don't know what exactly it is that they were really looking for. I mean, I think Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario World is an amazing game. It might be my favorite Super Mario Brothers game. I don't really know about that, but I have a soft spot, of course, for the original because it was my first video game. But they mentioned it here, like how huge the game is. I forgot how many levels the first game has, but it's like 100, or just shy of 100. And when you compare that to say like Sonic the Hedgehog, which yeah, I love that game too, but relatively short game, but you can sit down and beat that game in like 45 minutes, and you're not beating Super Mario World in 45 minutes unless you know all the tricks to use the warp whistles or whatever the game has. So anyway, and then the next game that they show here is actually not even a launch game, although it was close enough, I guess, a launch window game, and that's Gradius 3. They give that one straight eights, and I would say their main complaint about the game is slowdown. They're calling it flicker. I think people normally called it flicker back then, but what they're really referring to is just slowdown. Obviously now, maybe not obviously, I don't know how many people out there know this, but this guy named, I'm probably not going to say his name right, but it's like Vitor Villela, who's like a ROM hacking guy, has developed a way to add SA1 chip support to some of these old games. So you can patch the Gradius 3 ROM to add SA1 support, and then you can either make yourself a reproduction cartridge, or you can just play it on a flash card or an emulator. But it completely gets rid of the slowdown in Gradius 3.